Dante Moretti did not bleed slowly. He bled the way he did everything, all at once, without asking permission. 3 wounds. 2 in the left side of his chest. 1 in the stomach. The car that had been supposed to carry him safely across the city had instead carried him to the edge of a canal and left him there, leaking into the cold night air while the men who had pulled the triggers drove away without looking back. He had trusted those men. That was the part that sat heaviest in him now, not the pain, not the blood soaking through his shirt and into the crease of his palm when he pressed hard against his ribs. The trust. He had chosen them himself, years ago, raised them inside his organization the way a man raises sons. Given them territory. Given them money. Given them a name worth something in this city. And they had sat across from him at the summit table that evening, smiled across plates of expensive food, and waited for the signal. He had not heard the signal. He heard everything after it. Dante moved through the alley the way a man moves when the body is past pain and into something quieter, something that does not shout but simply pulls downward. His left leg was dragging. He did not look down at it. He kept his eyes on the thin strip of light at the end of the alley because the light was the only thing he had decided to care about. The city around him had no idea what it was watching. A night cleaner pushing a cart around the corner saw a man in a ruined suit stumble against a wall and looked away. People in this part of the city had long ago learned that looking away was the healthiest thing the eyes could do. Dante reached the wall and pressed his back against it and breathed. Once. Twice. He counted the breaths not because it helped but because counting was something to do instead of falling. He had enemies. He had always had enemies. That was not the surprise. What surprised him, what had been quietly surprising him for the last 40 minutes as he dragged himself through 3 blocks of the city's underside, was how small everything felt now. The empire he had spent 20 years building. The fear his name produced. The rooms that went quiet when he entered them. All of it felt very far away, like a story someone else had told him about a man he had once known. What felt close was the light above a door at the end of the alley. He pushed off the wall. He moved toward it. He did not make it all the way. His knees hit the ground approximately 4 feet from the door and he stayed there a moment, hands flat on the wet concrete, and considered the probability that this was where it ended. A doorstep. Someone's back entrance. The recycling bins 3 feet to his left smelled like old coffee and cardboard. He reached up for the door handle. His hand found it. He did not have the strength to turn it. He let his fist fall against the door instead. Once. The sound it made was embarrassingly quiet for a man who had once had a reputation that cleared rooms. The light above the door went on. He heard the lock turn. He heard the chain slide. He heard the door open, and cold air moved across his face, and then there was a pause that lasted approximately 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds he understood that whoever was standing in this doorway was deciding something. "You are blocking the drain," a woman said. Her voice was flat. Not frightened. Not theatrical. Flat, the way a person's voice gets when they are very tired and have decided that the world does not get to surprise them anymore. He looked up at her. She was not what he expected, though he could not have said what he had expected. She was wearing a green scrub top and gray trousers with a hospital lanyard still around her neck, which meant she had not long been home from a shift. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were dark and absolutely steady, moving across him the way a person's eyes move when they are assessing damage, not reacting to it. She looked at the wounds. She looked at his face. She looked at the wounds again. "Can you stand?" she said. "Partially," he said. She exhaled through her nose. Then she crouched down and put her shoulder under his arm. She was stronger than she looked. Or he was lighter than he should have been. Between the two of them, using the door frame in 3 attempts, they got him through the door and into a narrow hallway. "Kitchen," she said, steering him left. "Floor's easier to clean." He thought that was either very practical or very cold and decided it was both. She lowered him to the kitchen floor with more control than he expected from someone his size and her size and this situation. He sat with his back against the cabinet under the sink and watched her move. She was already opening a drawer. Already pulling out things with the focus of someone who had a mental list and was moving through it. "How long?" she said, crouching in front of him with a cloth in her hands, pressing it against the worst of the bleeding. "About an hour," he said. She pressed harder. He did not make a sound. She glanced at his face when he did not make a sound and something moved briefly across her expression, though he could not name it. "What is your name?" she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Does it matter right now?" he said. She held his gaze. Then she went back to what she was doing. "I suppose not," she said. "Mine is Sofia. In case you need to call for someone." "Sofia," he said. It came out quieter than he intended, because speaking was costing him more than it had a right to. She worked without talking for the next several minutes. He watched the ceiling. The kitchen was small and very clean, and there was a single plant on the windowsill that looked like it had been forgotten about and then remembered and was in the process of forgiving whoever had forgotten it. "I need to know if a lung is involved," she said. "Take the deepest breath you can." He breathed. "Okay," she said, and something in her voice loosened slightly. Not relief exactly. The professional adjustment of someone recalculating the odds. "I can work with this," she said. "But I need you to stay awake." "I am awake," he said. "I need you to stay that way." "All right." She looked at him. He looked at her. "All right," she said. Outside, the city moved on as it always did, indifferent and loud and entirely unaware that the most dangerous man inside it was sitting on a kitchen floor in a green-lit apartment, his blood on a stranger's dish towel, breathing because a tired woman with steady hands had decided, for reasons she had not yet explained even to herself, not to let him stop. He did not know her name until she told him. She did not know his name until much later. By the time she did, it would be too late for either of them to pretend it did not matter. The fever came on the second morning. Sofia had known it would. She had also known, from the moment she pressed that dish towel against his side on her kitchen floor, that she had stepped into something she could not fully measure yet. She was not in the habit of measuring things before she stepped into them. It had gotten her into trouble before. It had also gotten her through shifts that would have broken other people, so she had made her peace with the tendency. She sat on the edge of the cot she had set up in the second room, a room that had previously contained a desk, 2 boxes she had never unpacked, and the general memory of an intention to make it into something useful, and she watched Dante Moretti breathe. She did not yet know his last name. She knew his first name because he had told her in the small hours of the first night, when his consciousness was coming and going like a radio signal, and he had looked at her with eyes that were not quite focused and said, in a voice that sounded like gravel at the bottom of a river, "Dante. My name is Dante." As if it were important to him that someone know. As if he had decided, in whatever the fever was doing to his reasoning, that she should not have to call him nothing. She had said, "Good. Rest now, Dante." He had closed his eyes. She had sat in the chair by the cot and not slept, because she was still in nurse mode, which was different from the Sofia at-home mode she had been attempting to rebuild for the last 11 months. Nurse mode did not panic. Nurse mode monitored breathing and temperature and the color of skin and the rate at which a compress soaked through. Nurse mode was useful. She had always been grateful for it. She had also, in her most private moments, suspected that she hid inside it more than she should. By the second morning, his temperature was 39.6. She pressed a cool cloth against his forehead and he stirred. "Phone," he said. Not asking. Stating. "Good morning to you too," she said. "I need a phone." "The only phone in this apartment goes where I go," she said, and moved the cloth half an inch to the left because she had noticed that the left side of his head seemed to generate more heat. He turned his face toward her. His eyes were more focused today than they had been, which was either a good sign medically or a complicated sign in every other sense. "Do you understand who I am?" he said. She looked at him. "You are a man with 3 wounds and a fever of 39.6, she said. "That is who you are right now. Drink this." She held out a glass of water. He looked at the glass. He looked at her. He drank. Something shifted in his expression when he finished, though he controlled it immediately. She had worked in trauma long enough to recognize the expression of a man who was not used to needing anything, encountering the specific indignity of needing water. "I have people looking for me," he said. "I imagine you do," she said. "Some of them will not be friendly." She set the empty glass on the small table she had moved next to the cot. "Then I suggest you keep your voice down," she said. "My walls are not thick." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, you are not frightened." "I am tired," she said. "It presents similarly." He watched her cross the room to the window, where she checked that the blind was fully drawn, which it was, because she had checked it 4 times since dawn. She was not entirely without instinct for self-preservation. She simply did not let it run the room. "Why?" he said. She turned from the window. "Why what? Why did you bring me inside?" Sofia considered the question. She had considered it herself, standing in the doorway at that hour with his blood already on the floor and the sensible part of her mind listing all the very sensible reasons to close the door. She had listed them. She had closed the door behind him instead. "You were blocking the drain," she said. He looked at her for a long time. Then something happened at the corner of his mouth that was not quite a smile but was in the family of one. "That is not a real answer," he said. "It is the one I have," she said, and pulled the chair up to the cot and sat down. "Now lie still. Your temperature needs to come down before you do anything else." He lay still. He did not, she noticed, argue further. She filed that away alongside everything else she had been filing about him since that first night, the way he moved before the fever slowed him down, efficient and controlled, conserving everything. The way he had not made a sound when she worked on the wounds, which indicated either very high pain tolerance or very long practice at absorbing pain without showing it. The way his hands, even at their worst on the kitchen floor, had never been entirely relaxed. Always slightly ready. She knew the shape of a man who lived in readiness. She had grown up in a house with one. On the second afternoon, he talked in his sleep. Not much. Fragments. Names she did not recognize. Questions without anyone to answer them. At one point, very clearly, in a voice that sounded almost like a different person, he said, "I saw it. I saw it and I chose to trust anyway." She did not know what he meant. But she recognized the weight of it. She had her own version of that sentence. A different context. The same weight. She let him sleep. On the 3rd day, the fever broke and he was himself again, whatever that meant for a man like him. He sat up on the cot, pressed 2 fingers experimentally against the bandaging on his side, and looked around the room with the specific expression of a person recalibrating their position. "You are good at this," he said. "I am a nurse," she said, from the doorway. "Not just that," he said. She did not respond to that. "You kept me alive," he said. "I kept you from dying on my floor," she said. "That is not the same thing." He went still. Not because the words surprised him, but because they had landed somewhere specific, somewhere he had not expected to have a surface. He looked at her. "Not many people make that distinction," he said. "Most people do not need to," she said. "Are you hungry?" He was hungry. She made rice and broth, which was not what he had eaten in a very long time, and he ate it at her kitchen table, the man who owned 3 restaurants in the city, sitting at a small wooden table with mismatched chairs, eating from a bowl she had bought at a discount shop, and he said nothing about any of that. She sat across from him and drank her tea and watched the window. "You are careful," he said. "I live alone," she said. "Careful is practical." He looked at her hands around the cup. She had a particular way of holding things, he noticed. Like she had learned, at some point, to make herself small around objects she cared about. As if her grip might be what damaged them. He did not say this. He ate his rice. But he filed it away. Outside, a city that believed he was dead was in the process of reorganizing itself around that belief. Territory was being divided. Plans were being made. The men who had given the order were sleeping soundly for the first time in 3 years, which meant their guard was at its lowest. They did not know he was sitting in a kitchen in the north end of the city, eating broth from a bowl with a small chip at the rim, very quietly and very carefully, not dying. They would find out. But not yet. She found out on a Thursday. Sofia worked the afternoon shift that week, which meant she left the apartment at 1 in the afternoon and came back at 11 at night, which meant Dante had 9 hours each day in a space he could not leave and could not call from and could not use to do anything except sit with his own thoughts, which was not a state he was accustomed to. He did not complain about this. He slept when the body made him sleep. He walked the length of the apartment, slowly at first, then with less difficulty as the days passed, measuring his own recovery the way he measured everything, by what it could eventually be used for. He read her books, which were medical textbooks mostly, but also 3 novels tucked behind them like they were being kept private. All 3 were the kind of stories in which the world is harsh and the main character does not get everything they wanted but gets something worth having. He noted this. He looked at the photograph she kept on the small shelf beside the window, the one that was turned face down. He did not turn it over. He had his own face-down things. He noticed the second toothbrush on the edge of the bathroom sink, still in its original packaging, which meant it had been bought for someone who had not arrived, or had arrived and then been given no reason to stay. He did not examine this thought too closely. He simply moved past it the way you move past a room where a door is closed and the sound behind it is not your business. By Thursday, he was well enough to feel the constraint of the situation fully. He was also well enough to be thinking clearly, and thinking clearly meant thinking about what had happened and who had made it happen and what the order of the next steps needed to be. He needed to contact 2 people. Only 2 in the entire organization that he trusted without condition. The kind of trust that had been built over 15 years and had never had occasion to crack. He needed to reach them before whoever had given the order decided to verify the job was done. When Sofia came home at 11 that Thursday night, she walked through the door and looked at him across the kitchen and said, without any preamble, "Someone came to my workplace today." He went still. "A man," she said, setting down her bag and taking off her jacket with the focused calm she applied to everything. He was at the front desk. He told the receptionist he was looking for information about someone who might have been treated recently. He described a man in his 40s with dark hair and a serious injury. Dante said nothing. "He was not from the hospital administration," Sofia said. "I know the difference. He was not a policeman. I know that difference too." She folded her jacket over the back of the chair. He was the kind of man who looks at a room the way a room looks at most people. Like it already knows everything in it. "What did you tell the receptionist?" Dante said. "I told her I had seen a man matching that description come in 2 nights ago but leave before we could complete an intake. I told her he seemed intoxicated." She filled a glass of water from the tap. She passed this along. He left. The silence in the kitchen was very specific. The kind that arrives after someone has done something significant and both parties are aware of it. "You lied for me," Dante said. "I bought time," she said. "Those are different things." She turned from the sink and looked at him directly. "I need to know if more people are coming." He held her gaze. He had, over the past several days, developed a very clear sense of what Sofia could handle and what she could not, and it was not what he had initially assumed. She could handle a great deal. What she could not handle was being managed. Being told partial truths to keep her calm. He understood this without her saying it, because he recognized it as a quality in himself. Yes, he said. More people will come. She nodded. Like this was data, not a verdict. Then you need to do something about that, she said. I am going to, he said. I need to make 2 calls. If you give me your phone for 20 minutes, I can begin doing that tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and put her phone on the table in front of him. 20 minutes, she said, and walked into the other room. He picked up the phone. In the other room, Sofia sat on the edge of her bed and listened to the low, controlled sound of his voice through the wall. She could not make out words. She did not try. She pressed her hands together in her lap and looked at the floor and thought about the choice she had just made, and the choices before it, and the trajectory they were forming. She had come to this city 11 months ago with the precise intention of being no one. Of being small and quiet and connected to nothing that could pull her back into a life where her safety depended on the decisions of a man she could not control. She had chosen her apartment for its unremarkable neighborhood. She had chosen her shift for its hours. She had constructed a careful, modest life around the principle of not being findable. She had then opened her door at the wrong moment and found a man bleeding on her doorstep. She thought about what her mother would say about this, and almost laughed, and did not. Dante knocked on the door frame of the bedroom. He did not open the door, she noticed. He stood at the frame. 20 minutes, he said, and held out the phone. She crossed the room and took it. Thank you, he said. She looked at him. Did you reach who you needed to reach? Yes. Is it going to get worse before it gets better? Yes, he said. For a little while. She nodded once. Then I need you to tell me things, she said. Not everything. I do not need everything. But I need to know when I am in danger. I need to know before it arrives at my door. Can you do that? He looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said. Then we understand each other, she said. She went back to the kitchen to make tea, because she needed something to do with her hands, and Dante stood in the hallway for a moment after she had gone, in the specific stillness of a man who has not been spoken to like that in a very long time. Not spoken down to. Not spoken up to. Spoken to directly, as if the words were aimed at him and not at the idea of him, not at the name, not at what the name could do for someone. He moved down the hall and sat at the kitchen table. She put a cup in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it. Outside, the city was shifting. The 2 men he had reached were already moving. Plans that had been suspended for 4 days were restarting. The machinery of something large and careful was beginning to turn again, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Inside the kitchen, 2 people sat on opposite sides of a small table and drank tea. The silence between them had, without either of them agreeing to it, become the comfortable kind. The first attempt came on a Saturday morning. Sofia was still asleep. Dante was not. He had not been sleeping much, which was partly the body's process of knitting itself back together through the night hours and partly because he did not sleep deeply in spaces he did not control. He sat in the chair by the kitchen window in the gray pre-dawn and did what he had been doing for 4 mornings now, thinking through the architecture of a betrayal. 3 men had known the exact route of that evening. 3 men had had access to the specific timing of the summit. Of those 3, 2 had been in his organization long enough to have their loyalty tested and not found wanting. The third was a man named Colin Marsh, who had come in 2 years ago through a business arrangement, who had smiled at the right moments and spoken carefully and who Dante had, in the one lapse he would spend a long time examining, trusted on the basis of competence rather than history. He had not risen to where he was by making that mistake twice. He was reviewing this when his phone, the clean one his man Oliver had dropped in a sealed envelope through the mail slot 2 nights ago, buzzed once on the table. He looked at it. 3 words from Oliver, car on street. Dante was on his feet in 4 seconds. He moved through the apartment without turning on lights. He already knew the layout, he had memorized it within the first 24 hours, which was reflex, not choice. He went to the bedroom door and knocked twice, light but deliberate. Sofia was awake within 2 seconds. Which told him something about the quality of her sleep. "Get up and get dressed," he said through the door, keeping his voice flat. "Do not turn on the light. Do not go to the windows." A pause. Then, "How long do I have?" "Minutes," he said. "Maybe more. I do not know yet." He heard her moving. He went back to the kitchen and looked at his phone again. Oliver had sent a follow-up, 2 men, staying in the car. Watching the building. He exhaled. Watching, not moving. They had the location but not the confirmation. They were still in the verification stage, which meant he had a window. Sofia appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed, her hair loose, holding her shoes in one hand with the focused calm of someone who had decided that panic was a luxury she was not going to afford herself. She looked at him. He told her what was happening. Not everything. What she needed. The car. The 2 men. The fact that they were watching, not yet approaching. The window they had. She listened without interrupting. "What do we do?" she said. "You leave through the building's service entrance on the ground floor," he said. "Walk north. Do not run. Running makes people notice. Walk north and get to the hospital and stay there. You have a shift today anyway." "What about you?" "I am going to handle the situation," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Define handle," she said. "Make it so they cannot report back that they found what they were looking for," he said, which was the most honest answer he could give her without giving her information she did not need. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she put on her shoes. "When it is done," she said, kneeling to tie the lace of the left one, "I want to know. Not details. Just that it is done." "You will know," he said. She stood up. She picked up her bag. She looked at him one more time at the kitchen doorway, with an expression he could not fully decode, which was unusual for him. Then she was gone. He waited until he heard the fire door at the end of the corridor close. Then he picked up his phone. He called Oliver. What happened next, on the street below, took 11 minutes. Sofia did not see any of it. She was already 3 blocks north, walking at the pace of a person on their way to a shift, her hands loose at her sides, her face angled forward, her breathing steady. She had learned steadiness from necessity. The same way she had learned most things. Dante's message reached her phone at 7:23 in the morning. 2 words, "It is done." She read it standing outside the hospital's staff entrance, with the early light beginning to come over the rooftops and the first delivery trucks of the day moving through the intersection down the block. She put the phone in her pocket. She went inside. She did not think about what "it is done" meant, in the specific and practical sense. She thought about it the way she thought about a great many things she had learned, over 11 months of deliberate forgetting, to file without opening. She acknowledged it, she placed it, she moved past it. When she came home at night, the apartment was as she had left it. Clean. Quiet. The kitchen table uncluttered. Dante sitting in the chair by the window, reading the book he had taken from behind the medical textbooks 3 days ago, which told her he had either run out of other things to do or liked it. He looked up when she came in. She set down her bag. "Tea," she said. "Yes," he said. "Thank you." She put the kettle on. She did not ask about the morning. He did not elaborate on it. They had arrived, without any formal agreement, at an understanding about what was shared between them and what was not, and it was working in the way that only things built on mutual recognition rather than compromise tend to work. But she noticed, as she reached for the mugs, that he had been watching her since she came through the door. Not the way men sometimes watched, not calculating or assessing, or at least not only that. The way a person watches something they were not certain they were going to see again. She put the mug in front of him. He looked at it. Then up at her. "You were not frightened this morning," he said. "On the street." "I told you," she said, sitting down across from him. "Tired looks the same." He nodded slowly. "What happened to you?" he said. "Before this city." She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the window. The blind was still drawn. "I made the same mistake you made," she said. "I trusted someone on the basis of what they could do rather than who they were." She paused. "It cost me more than I expected." He did not ask follow-up questions. He understood that this was as much as was on offer, and he accepted it the way she had accepted every piece of him, without pushing for the parts that were not ready to be given. "I am sorry," he said. She looked at him. "You did not do it," she said. "No," he said. "But I understand the weight of it. I am sorry you carry it." The kettle finished boiling. She poured. The sound of it was small and domestic and completely out of keeping with the morning they had both had, and somehow that made it perfect. They sat at the table. They drank their tea. The city outside went about its business. Something was building between them that neither of them had words for yet, not because the words did not exist, but because they were both people who had learned to be very careful about saying things out loud that could not be taken back. So they let it sit in the room with them, unspoken and real, and did not try to hurry it toward anything. Dante went to his phone after tea and spent 2 hours communicating in the compressed, coded shorthand of a man who was quietly, methodically beginning to dismantle the structure that had tried to bury him. Sofia sat in the other room and read one of the medical textbooks she had already read 3 times and was not really reading now. At some point during that hour, without making a decision about it, she reached over to the bedside shelf and took the photograph that was lying face down, and she turned it over, and she looked at it for a long time, and then she set it back down. Face up this time. Dante, from the kitchen, could not see this. But the apartment felt different after she did it. Slightly less held in. Slightly more like a place where a person was actually living rather than waiting. Neither of them spoke about it. But they both knew the room had changed. Dante left on a Wednesday. He told her the night before. Not dramatically. He came into the kitchen where she was reading and sat down at the table and said, "I will be going tomorrow. Early." Sofia set down the book. "How early?" "Before you wake up," he said. She nodded. She had known it was coming. She had been tracking it the same way she tracked any recovery, by increments, by the return of capacity, by the moment when the body no longer requires external help to maintain itself. He had reached that point 3 days ago. The fact that he had stayed 3 days beyond it was something she had not commented on. "Are you going back to your," she paused, choosing the word carefully, "your world?" "Yes," he said. "Is it safe?" "For you?" He tilted his head, considering. "Safer than it was," he said. "I have been putting pieces in place. The people who made this happen have had their time to feel secure. That is nearly over." She looked at him across the table. There was something she wanted to say, and she was choosing whether to say it, and he could see her choosing, which meant she was being deliberately transparent with him about the process. "Be careful," she said, finally. "I intend to be," he said. "I do not mean strategically," she said. "I mean, be careful with yourself. Not just the situation." He was quiet for a moment. "That is a thing people do not usually say to me," he said. "I imagine not," she said. "I am saying it anyway." He looked at her. Something in his face did something careful and private that she caught only the edge of before he controlled it. "Sofia," he said. "Yes. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid in the ordinary sense. You do not owe me anything, she said. I do, he said, and his tone was not arguing, simply certain. I will not insult you by pretending otherwise. He paused. But I will also not make you a promise tonight that I do not know if I can keep. She looked at him for a long time. Then, that is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 11 months. I will come back, he said. And then, more quietly, if you will allow it. She held his gaze. Come back when you are not bleeding, she said. He almost smiled. That is a condition I can work with. He was gone when she woke the next morning. The cot was made, not the way she made it, but the way someone makes a bed when they are unaccustomed to domesticity but wish to leave something tidy behind. The mug he had used for tea was washed and upside down on the drying rack. On the table, he had left nothing. No note. No number. Nothing. She had not expected anything. She stood in the kitchen in the early light and looked at the empty table and told herself that was fine, and mostly believed it. She made coffee. She drank it. She went to work. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, her supervisor called her into the office and told her that a private security firm had contacted the hospital on her behalf regarding an ongoing personal security matter, and that 2 members of that firm would be stationed outside her building for the foreseeable future, and that the hospital had been asked to notify her. Sofia sat in the chair across from her supervisor's desk and listened to all of this with a completely steady face. Then she went to her locker and typed a message into her phone. 6 words, call them off or I walk. She sent it to the only number she had used once, 3 weeks ago, and had not deleted. 14 seconds later, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. 1 word, no. She stared at it. Then, before she could arrange her face into anything more sensible, she laughed. It surprised her completely. It came out before she could stop it, a short, genuine sound that bounced off the metal lockers, and she pressed her hand over her mouth and stood there for a moment with her shoulders shaking. Then she collected herself. She typed back, we are going to have a conversation about this. His reply was immediate, yes, we are. She pocketed her phone. She went back to her shift. She was more alert for the rest of the afternoon than she had been in weeks, which she refused to examine too closely. The 2 men outside her building remained. She walked past them every morning and every night and did not acknowledge them. They did not acknowledge her. But she noticed, on the 4th day, that one of them held the building door open for her without being asked, and she thought, despite herself, entirely against her better judgment, that this was the most oblique apology she had ever received from anyone. She accepted it in the spirit it was offered. She did not make it easy. He came back on a night in November, 7 weeks after he had left her apartment before dawn with nothing on the table. There was no warning. Or rather, the warning was the sound of the buzzer at the main entrance, at 10:15 at night, when she was sitting on the kitchen floor reorganizing the cabinet under the sink because she could not sleep and the cabinet under the sink had needed reorganizing for 3 months. She got up. She pressed the intercom. She did not say anything. After a pause, a voice said, I am not bleeding. She pressed the release button. She heard him on the stairs. Not labored, not careful the way he had been 7 weeks ago, a man's ordinary footsteps, even and unhurried. She had already opened the door before he reached the top of the stairs, which she noticed and was mildly irritated by herself for. He was different. Or rather, he was himself in a way he had not been able to be in her apartment before. The wounds were healed. The fever was long gone. He stood in the hallway and looked at her, and he was every inch what he was, the thing he had been in her kitchen, the shape behind the wounded man, the reason people moved differently in rooms he entered. And he was also still the man who had eaten her rice from a chipped bowl and said nothing about it. You have 2 men stationed outside my building, she said, standing in her doorway. I do, he said. We are going to talk about that. We are, he said. But perhaps inside. She stood back. He came in. The apartment felt different with him in it in this way, not smaller, but more occupied, in the specific sense of a space that has been waiting without knowing it was waiting. She closed the door. Sit down, she said, because she needed to do something and making him sit down was a task she could organize around. He sat at the kitchen table. She sat across from him. The men outside, she said. Stay, he said. I did not agree to that. I know, he said. I did it anyway. I will keep doing it. He met her eyes. You may be angry about it. I am angry about it. I understand, he said. He did not apologize. He also did not retreat. You are connected to me now, whether either of us intended it or not. That connection makes you visible to people who want to reach me. I cannot undo that. I can only manage what happens because of it. She looked at him. So they are for you, she said. Not for me. He considered this. Both, he said. Genuinely both. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I do not want to be managed. I know, he said. I am not managing you. I am managing the situation around you. Those are different things. You sound like me, she said. Perhaps we have been talking to each other for long enough, he said, and the way he said it was quiet and even and she had to look at the table for a moment. She stood up and put the kettle on, because she needed the kettle on. Tell me what happened, she said, with her back to him. After you left. Not everything. What you can tell me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told her. He told her about Colin Marsh, who had organized the betrayal over 18 months with the patience of someone who had learned patience from watching Dante himself. He told her about the two underbosses who had provided the logistics. He told her about Oliver, and about the other man, a quiet person named Patrick who had been with Dante since the beginning and had wept, briefly and privately, when Dante had walked back through a door he was not supposed to walk back through. He did not tell her the specifics of what had happened to Colin Marsh and the underbosses. She did not ask. They had their understanding. It is over, she said. That part, he said. Yes. She turned from the kettle. What part is not over? He looked at her across the kitchen. The part where I work out what I am doing, he said. And then, here. With you. What I am hoping to do. The kitchen was very quiet. You said you would come back if I would allow it, she said. Yes. I allowed it, she said. I know, he said. But allowing someone back through a door is different from allowing them to stay. She looked at him for a long time. He did not fill the silence. He had learned, over years of rooms that went quiet when he entered them, that silence was a space he could either press into or leave open. He left it open. I have rules, she said. I would expect nothing less, he said. I am not a person you manage, she said. No, he agreed. I am not someone you protect by keeping in the dark. No, he said. I understand. And you are not someone I can pretend is other than what he is, she said. I have tried that. It does not work for me. He was very still. I am not asking you to pretend anything, he said. She turned back to the kettle and poured. The steam rose. She carried both mugs to the table and sat down. He picked up his mug with both hands, the way he always did. She had not realized she had noticed that until she saw him do it again, and something in her settled at the recognition. They sat across from each other. The apartment was quiet and warm, and November was pressing against the windows with the specific cold of a season that has decided it is serious. Sofia, he said. She looked at him. I did not come back only because of the debt, he said. She held his gaze. I know, she said. He looked at her. Something moved through his expression that he did not try to contain this time. She saw it. He saw that she saw it, and he let it stand. Outside, one of the two men who were employed to make sure nothing got close enough to this building to matter was standing at his post. The streets were quiet. The city was doing what it always did, carrying its 1,000 private lives from one hour to the next without any concern for what happened inside any given apartment on any given floor. Inside the apartment, Sofia reached to the shelf behind her without turning around and picked up the photograph that had been face down for 11 months and was now face up. She set it on the table between them. It was a picture of a woman and a child on a beach, squinting into the sun, laughing at something off camera. The woman was younger, and her hair was loose, and she was entirely unguarded in the way people only are when they do not know they are being photographed. "My mother," Sofia said. "And me. I was 7. Dante looked at the photograph. "She died 4 years ago," Sofia said. "The person I came to this city to get away from made it impossible for me to be there when she did." She paused. "That is what it cost me." He was very still. "I am sorry," he said, and he meant it the way people mean things when there is nothing useful to add. She took the photograph back and held it for a moment, then set it back on the shelf. She looked at him. "I have not told anyone that in 11 months, she said. He held her gaze. "Thank you for telling me. Do not make me regret it," she said. "I will try very hard not to," he said. The second toothbrush was still in the bathroom, still in its packaging. She did not take it out that night. But when Dante came back the next evening, and the evening after that, she moved through her apartment differently. Less like a person waiting for the moment she would need to leave again. More like a person who had decided, quietly and without ceremony, to inhabit the space she was standing in. She threw away the second toothbrush 10 days later. Not dramatically. She noticed it while she was cleaning. She picked it up and dropped it into the bin under the sink. She closed the cabinet. She went to make coffee. Dante, who was reading at the kitchen table, did not see her do it. But he saw the cabinet door was closed differently when she came back, and he understood, without asking, that something had been let go. He picked up his book. She poured the coffee. Outside, the city went on as cities do, indifferent to the ordinary extraordinary thing that was happening in a small apartment on the north side, 2 people choosing, carefully and without fanfare, to stop surviving alone. The door was unlocked now. It stayed that way.